Chapter 1. Introduction. Love as a universal phenomenon. Love is a feeling that is at once simple and infinitely complex. It is one of the oldest experiences of mankind and appears in all cultures, epochs, and social structures. Whether it manifests itself in family ties, romantic relationships, friendships, or spiritual devotion, love influences people's thoughts, actions, and feelings in a fundamental way. Historically, love cannot be fully defined or reduced to a single concept, because it exists simultaneously as emotion, social practice, moral ideal, and cultural symbol. Even in the earliest human communities, love played a central role. Bonds between partners, parents and children, or between friends ensured survival, organized social structures, and created cohesion. Love was not just a feeling here, but a practical necessity that allowed people to form community, share resources, and protect the next generation. Archaeological finds of burials, graves, and symbols show that people expressed grief, affection, and emotional bonds thousands of years ago. These early expressions of love were often inextricably linked to social and religious structures. Rituals, offerings, and ceremonies symbolize the bond between people, but also the link between the earthly and spiritual worlds. With the emergence of complex societies, the idea of love increasingly changed. In early advanced civilizations such as Mesopotamia, Egypt, or China, love appeared in myths, poems, and literary works as well as in everyday social rules. Love stories were not only for entertainment, but also reflected social norms, power structures, and the roles of men and women. The idea of romantic love as a personal, emotional bond began to develop gradually, often in the field of tension between duty, social expectations, and individual longing. However, love is not only a cultural or social phenomenon, but also a psychological and biological one. Neuroscientific studies show that love triggers complex emotional, hormonal, and cognitive processes in the brain. Bonding hormones such as oxytocin and dopamine influence perception, motivation, and decision-making in love relationships. At the same time, psychology shows that love can take many forms: passionate, friendly, unconditional, or spiritual. This complexity makes love a topic that fascinates philosophers, artists, and scientists alike. Throughout history, people have sought to understand, idealize, control, and celebrate love. She was sung about in poems, explored in philosophy, portrayed in theater and opera, and venerated in rituals. Despite its universal presence, however, love is never static. It changes with social structures, cultural norms, technological developments, and historical upheavals. Each epoch forms its own idea of love, and yet the central human need for closeness, connection, and emotional attachment remains unchanged. This introduction is intended to set the framework for understanding love in historical, cultural, and philosophical contexts. In the following chapters, we will trace the journey of love through the millennia, from the first human bonds, through mythological, literary, and philosophical representations, to the challenges and possibilities of modern love relationships. It becomes clear that love is not just a feeling, but a mirror of human societies, ideals, and aspirations, and that it still plays a central role in our lives today. Chapter 2. Love in Early History. The roots of love go deep into the early history of mankind, long before written records existed. In those early times, love was closely linked to survival, community, and social structures. Relationships between people not only served as an emotional bond, but also had practical functions. They strengthened cooperation within groups, ensured the protection of offspring, and promoted the exchange of resources. In small hunter-gatherer societies, social bonds based on mutual care and trust were formed, and affection between partners, parents, and children was a crucial factor in survival. Archaeological finds indicate that as early as the Paleolithic age, people expressed their emotional attachments in a variety of ways. Graves that were used jointly by couples or family members suggest that emotional closeness and care for each other were carried on even in death. Grave goods, from tools to jewelry to food, show that affection, reverence, and remembrance played a central role even then. These finds make it clear that love and attachment were not just abstract feelings, but passed into concrete actions, rituals, and material forms of expression. In addition, early human societies played with symbols, gestures, and ritual practices to communicate affection. Cave paintings, small figures, and artistic depictions depicting couples or family groups could represent early expressions of love feelings or bonding rituals. Such depictions reflect not only aesthetic preferences, but also the social and cultural values that underlie emotional bonds. Romantic love, as we understand it today, was probably not the central motif of human relationships in early history. Instead, pragmatic aspects dominated: reproduction, protection, economic cooperation, and social stability. Nevertheless, traces of emotional attachment can already be seen. Archaeological evidence of those injured or elderly in Stone Age communities show that affection and care played a decisive role. They were an expression of attachment and responsibility that went far beyond mere biological necessity. Early history also means the development of communities, tribal structures, and cultural norms that embedded love in a social context. Bonds were governed by rituals, oral traditions, and taboos that ensured relationships remained stable and conflict was minimized. These early social rules laid the foundation for more complex notions of love in later advanced civilizations, where love was not only a means of survival, but also became a moral, artistic, and spiritual ideal. To sum up, love emerged in early history as a basic human need that was closely linked to survival, social cooperation, and care. It manifested itself in both practical actions and symbolic expressions and formed the basis for the cultural and emotional development of humanity. Even if romantic ideals were not yet in the foreground, early history shows that the longing for closeness, attachment, and emotional connection was already a central part of human life at that time, a common thread that will run through all later eras of love. Chapter 3: Love in Ancient Civilizations, Mesopotamia and Egypt. In the early advanced civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, love played a multifaceted role. It was anchored both spiritually and socially, and found expression in myths, literature, rituals, and everyday practices. Even in these early civilizations, love reflected a connection between the individual and the community, and it was inextricably linked to power, religion, and moral norms. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of the written tradition, the first literary testimonies of love can be found. Epics, hymns, and love poems testify to a complex idea of partnership, passion, and emotional bonding. The gods played a central role in this. Goddesses of love such as Inanna and goddesses of fertility symbolized both physical passion and spiritual devotion. Love was understood as a powerful, often unpredictable force that could overwhelm people as well as divine beings. Literary works such as the famous love songs from Uruk of Babylon convey that the tension between social order and emotional desire already existed at that time. Love could bring joy and fulfillment, but it could also cause jealousy, loss, and conflict. In people's everyday lives, love was closely linked to marriage, family structure, and social obligations. Marriage meant not only romantic attachment, but also political, economic, and social alliances. Partnerships were often arranged, and adherence to fidelity, respect, and mutual care was crucial for social cohesion. Nevertheless, there are indications in literary sources that passion and longing went beyond the mere function of marriage. Love letters, poems, and love stories show that people highly valued emotional intensity, personal affection, and erotic experience. In Egypt, love also occupied a central place, but it was strongly linked to spirituality and ideas of the afterlife. Goddesses like Hathor embodied love, joy, and fertility, and love rituals were part of religious practice. Marital love was seen as a harmonious union between a man and a woman that existed on both an emotional and spiritual level. Egyptian grave inscriptions often contain messages of love between spouses that were supposed to extend beyond death, an indication that love shaped not only life but also the afterlife. Egyptian literature, like love songs from the New Kingdom, conveys the subtleties of human emotions, longing, affection, play, jealousy, and the joy of reunion. In Egypt, too, love was often a balancing act between personal passion and social expectations, between physical closeness and moral responsibility. The beauty of the language, the imagery and symbolism of these works show that love was already understood at that time as a central human experience that enriches individual life and at the same time reflects social orders. In both cultures, Mesopotamia and Egypt, a common pattern emerges. Love is both a personal and a social force, expressed in myths, art, literature, and everyday life. It is never purely private or isolated, but always embedded in religious, moral, and social contexts. The early advanced civilizations thus lay the foundation for later concepts of love in Greece, Rome, and beyond, showing that emotional attachment, passion, and spiritual devotion are of universal importance. In summary, love existed as a multi-layered phenomenon in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It was power, longing, spiritual connection, and social responsibility at the same time. These early civilizations make it clear that love was already a central human theme several thousand years ago, occupying people alike in literature, rituals, and everyday life, and which formed the basis for the rich tradition of love in the millennia to come. Chapter 4. Love in Antiquity, Greece. In ancient Greece, love played a central role in philosophy, literature, and everyday life. The Greeks developed a differentiated understanding of love that encompassed different forms and dimensions. Terms such as eros, philia, agape, and storge each referred to different types of love and helped to structure and reflect on the complexity of human relationships. Love was not only a private feeling, but was closely linked to morality, society, and even political order. Eros, the passionate and often physical love, was a powerful, almost divine force according to the Greek understanding. In mythology, Eros itself embodied the energy of attraction and desire, unpredictable and at the same time inevitable. Philosophers such as Plato regarded Eros not only as a sensual passion, but also as a pursuit of perfection, beauty, and truth. In his writings, especially in the Symposium, Plato describes Eros as the drive that can lead man to spiritual development and philosophical knowledge. Love here was both a physical desire and a spiritual pursuit of the ideal, a bridge between human experience and higher knowledge. Philia, on the other hand, referred to friendly love, which was based on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. It was fundamental to the functioning of the polis, the Greek city-states, and ensured social stability. Friendship, camaraderie, and loyalty were central aspects of philia, and it was equally valued in political, military, and family contexts. The philosophers Aristotle and other Greek thinkers emphasized the importance of philia as the moral and ethical foundation of human communities. Agape, the selfless, unconditional love, was less common than the other forms in Greek antiquity, but was increasingly addressed in philosophical discourses. It often went beyond one's own benefit, connected people with each other, and laid the foundation for later religious concepts of charity. Storge, the family love, described affection between parents and children or within the family, and formed the emotional backbone of society. The literature of antiquity reflects this diversity. Poets such as Sappho of Lesbos celebrated the sensual and passionate dimension of love in emotionally dense poems that expressed longing, desire, and personal devotion. Tragedies and epics such as the works of Homer showed how love was linked to loyalty, honor, and social norms. Love could be a motivation for heroic deeds, but it could also provoke conflict, betrayal, and tragedy. It has always been a driving force in human action. In addition to personal experience, love was also a socially shaped ideal. The Greeks celebrated beauty, harmony, and balance not only in the body, but also in relationships. Aesthetics, ethical values, and emotional attachment were inextricably linked. In this culture, love was at the same time an inspiration for philosophy, art, and politics. It was not just a feeling, but a force that shaped the individual, strengthened communities, and influenced thinking about life itself. In summary, it can be said that Greek antiquity laid the foundations for the differentiated understanding of love. She realized that love can take many forms: passionate, friendly, familial, or selfless. This differentiation shaped the Western conception of love well into the Renaissance and modern times. Love in Greece was not just a personal feeling, but a cultural and philosophical concept that structured the relationship between the individual, community, and the ideal of beauty and virtue. Chapter 5. Love in Antiquity, Rome. In ancient Rome, love played a multi-layered role that was shaped by social norms, legal structures, and cultural ideals. Roman society, strongly determined by hierarchies and family obligations, understood love not only as a personal feeling, but also as part of the social fabric. Love in Rome was both an emotional experience and a means of securing social stability and political power. Roman love differed from Greek love in some aspects. While the Greeks often differentiated between different forms of love, such as eros, philia, and agape, the Romans placed more emphasis on practical aspects: marriage, family, fidelity, and social duties. Love was closely linked to marriage and family ties, and the maintenance of social order and moral integrity was a core value. Nevertheless, the passion that symbolized eros also existed in Rome, especially in literary works and artistic representations. Roman poets such as Ovid, Catullus, and Virgil dealt intensively with the facets of love. Ovid's Ars Amatoria was a mixture of love theory and poetic expression, dealing with both playful seduction and the complexity of human relationships. Catullus, on the other hand, depicted deep emotional bonds, jealousy, longing, and loss in his poems, with personal feelings often in the foreground. Rome's literary culture shows that love was both a private passion and a public issue that was reflected, discussed, and idealized. Roman marriage was often an arrangement that served political, economic, and social purposes. Still, there was room for affection, friendship, and emotional bonding. The idea of the conjugium, the marital partnership, included not only legal responsibility, but also emotional closeness and a shared way of life. In Roman philosophy, especially among Stoics like Seneca, love was considered a virtuous bond that promoted self-knowledge, moral integrity, and harmonious coexistence. In addition, erotic love played an important role in Roman culture, especially in private and literary contexts. Erotic poems, sculptures, and frescoes reflected the understanding of passion, desire, and beauty, with physicality and emotion inextricably linked. Nevertheless, this passion often remained a field of tension between social order, moral expectations, and individual experience. Family love and loyalty were central pillars of Roman life. Parent-child relationships, marital fidelity, and family responsibility formed the emotional and social backbone of society. Love here was not just a personal feeling, but a moral duty that ensured the stability of the community and the continuation of the family. This combination of emotional attachment and social responsibility had a lasting impact on the Roman idea of love. In conclusion, love was understood both emotionally and practically in ancient Rome. It was passion, friendship, family bond, and social duty at the same time. Roman culture showed that love goes far beyond individual feelings. It forms communities, influences moral values, and is at the same time a source of inspiration, passion, and literary expression. Rome thus continued the differentiation of love from Greek antiquity, but linked it more closely to social structures and political interests without losing sight of the emotional depth and cultural significance. Chapter 6: Love in the Middle Ages, Romanticism and Chivalry. The Middle Ages brought forth a new dimension of love that was very different from the ideas of antiquity. In a time marked by religion, feudal order, and social hierarchies, the idea of courtly love, amour courtois, developed as a cultural and literary ideal. Love was now seen not only as a personal bond or moral duty, but as an ethical, aesthetic, and emotional experience that could lead man to virtue and self-perfection. Courtly love arose in the context of chivalry and nobility. Knights were considered not only warriors, but also moral and cultural role models. Her love was often for a lady who was usually married or unreachable. This form of love was not primarily physical, but idealized, spiritual, and symbolic. The ladies inspired knights to bravery, self-discipline, and poetic expression. Acts of love, rituals, and courtly etiquette regulated these relationships and made love a form of moral education. She combined emotional longing with social order, artistic expression, and knightly honor. In literary terms, courtly love manifested itself in the poetry and prose of the Middle Ages. Minstrels in Germany, troubadours in France, and chivalric epics throughout Europe described the joys, sorrows, and agonies of love. The lyrics showed love as a force that uplifts man but also imposes trials. Longing, patience, and loyalty were central themes, as were jealousy, despair, and waiting for reunion. Courtly love was at the same time an inspiration for poetry, music, and art, and it gave a social and cultural dimension to the ideal of the romantic relationship. The Christian religion also shaped the medieval conception of love. While courtly love was often secular and romantic, Christian doctrine emphasized charity, caritas, as the highest form of moral and spiritual devotion. Love was understood as a divine commandment that went beyond individual desires and structured life in community, justice, and moral responsibility. Religious ideas thus combined human love with a spiritual dimension, creating a close relationship between earthly passion and divine order. Despite the strong ideality of courtly love, there were also real aspects of human relationships. Marriages were still often arranged and served economic, political, or dynastic purposes. But within these structures, affection, friendship, and emotional attachment could develop, and literary ideals shaped the expectations. Love thus became a field of tension between social duty, emotional longing, and artistic representation. In summary, it can be said that the Middle Ages idealized love in a new way and at the same time embedded it in social and religious structures. Courtly love combined passion with virtue, spirituality with aesthetic expression, longing with chivalrous honor. At the same time, it reflected on social norms and moral responsibility. This era laid the foundation for the romantic idea of love that was carried forward in literature, music, and art, and made it clear that love is far more than a feeling. It is a cultural ideal, an ethical concept, and a source of inspiration that would shape generations. Chapter 7: Love in the Renaissance, Humanism and Individuality. The Renaissance marked a new era of thinking, feeling, and creating, in which love played a central role. This epoch, marked by humanism, the rediscovery of antiquity, and artistic awakening, shifted the perspective on love from the socially and religiously regulated to individual experience and personal development. Love was increasingly understood as an expression of human nature, as a source of inspiration, and as a mirror of the inner soul. The focus was on the reawakened interest in the ideals of antiquity. Renaissance poets, philosophers, and artists drew on Greek and Roman notions of love that combined eros, friendship, and virtue, and reinterpreted them in the light of human individuality. Love was seen as a universal human need that encompassed mind, body, and emotion equally. At the same time, humanism emphasized the dignity and autonomy of the individual. Every human being was capable of loving, suffering, and recognizing himself in love. The literature of this time impressively reflected the new dimension of love. Italian poets such as Petrarch and Dante Alighieri related love to beauty, ideals, and spiritual development. Petrarch's Canzoniere, for example, describes the passionate veneration of an idealized woman who symbolizes both worldly longing and inner aspiration. In the Divine Comedy, Dante combines love with divine order, personal development, and moral perfection, whereby love appears as the central force of life and the soul's journey. In addition to poetic representation, love was also a topic of visual art. Painters such as Leonardo da Vinci, Sandro Botticelli, and Raphael depicted emotional intensity, passion, and idealism. Love was made visible through gestures, facial expressions, and symbolism, and combined aesthetics with emotional expression. At the same time, the Renaissance emphasized individuality. Each person had their own, unique way of loving and feeling. The combination of physical beauty, spiritual elevation, and emotional depth reflected the comprehensive understanding of love. The Renaissance also changed the perspective on romantic relationships. Marriages were still often arranged for social or economic reasons, but the ideal of personal affection, emotional attachment, and mutual respect became more important. Love was seen as a source of personal development and moral maturity. It was no longer just a social duty or spiritual task, but an opportunity to shape one's own life, to experience passion, and to seek aesthetic and emotional perfection. The combination of passion, spirit, and virtue had a lasting impact on the ideals of this era. Love was at once sensual and spiritual, individual and universal, real and symbolic. It inspired literature, art, music, and philosophy, and reflected the new possibilities of human experience. In the Renaissance, it became clear that love is more than a feeling. It is an expression of human nature, the engine of creativity, and the path to self-confidence, moral maturity, and aesthetic knowledge. In summary, the Renaissance celebrated love in all its complexity. She combined ancient ideals with humanistic individuality, sensual passion with spiritual elevation, and personal experience with cultural expression. Love became a central theme of human existence, shaping individual identity as well as social and cultural development, inspiring generations of thinkers, poets, and artists. Chapter 8. Love in the Baroque, Passion and Morality. The Baroque period was characterized by contrasts, drama, and strong contrasts, and these characteristics were also reflected in the concept of love. Love was now often experienced as an intense, passionate, and at the same time morally bound force, which stretched people between devotion, desire, and social constraints. The Baroque was characterized by a strong awareness of transience, death, and the finiteness of life, motifs that decisively shaped the way love was felt, represented, and lived. The literature and poetry of the Baroque emphasized emotions in their extreme intensity. Poets such as Andreas Gryphius, Martin Opitz, or Paul Fleming described love as a power that overwhelms people, plunges them into happiness and despair. The poetic language was characterized by opposites, joy and pain, closeness and distance, desire and moral duty. Love became the expression of an existential tension in which passion and virtue, physical desire, and spiritual devotion were inseparable. At the same time, love in the Baroque period was strongly morally and socially regimented. Marriage and family responsibilities determined private life, and romantic feelings often had to take a back seat to social expectations. Fidelity, loyalty, and class awareness were central values that determined the living out of love. In courtly culture and the bourgeoisie, relationships were conducted according to strict norms. But it was precisely these restrictions that created space for literary reflection on longing, unfulfilled love, and emotional conflicts. The visual arts also reflected Baroque love. Painters such as Peter Paul Rubens or Caravaggio depicted physical passion, sensual beauty, and emotional drama in their works. Love was portrayed as an overwhelming power, as an intense experience that permeates human existence. At the same time, moral and religious motives found their way into the depiction. Passion was not only allowed to be pleasure, but had to be in harmony with ethical responsibility and divine order. Music also played an important role in the experience of love. Baroque operas, cantatas, and songs combined dramatic expressiveness with emotional depth. Arias about love, longing, and loss illustrated how strongly personal feelings and social norms were intertwined. The portrayal of love as theater between heart, mind, and moral conscience had a lasting impact on artistic and cultural perception. In summary, it can be said that the Baroque period understood love as a powerful, passionate, and at the same time morally bound experience. It was intense, dramatic, and existential, marked by contrasts between desire and virtue, between closeness and social order. Love in the Baroque period reflected the awareness of finiteness, the longing for intensity, and the tension between individual feelings and collective expectations. She inspired literature, art, and music alike, and showed that love in human life is a power that both moves the heart and shapes the mind. Chapter 9. Love in the Enlightenment. Reason and Emotion. The Age of Enlightenment fundamentally changed the understanding of love. Shaped by rationalism, faith in science, and social reform, reason moved more strongly into the center of human action, also in love. At the same time, the modern idea of individual feelings began to emerge, which took emotions, passion, and personal happiness seriously. Love was now seen as a field of tension between reason and feeling, between social responsibility and personal self-realization. The philosophy of the Enlightenment emphasized the rationality of man. Love relationships should be based on a foundation of mutual respect, moral integrity, and rational choice. According to the ideals, love was not a mere impulse of the heart, but a conscious choice that had to take into account the good of the individual and the community. Philosophers such as Immanuel Kant reflected on the moral dimension of love. It was not only passion, but also virtue based on respect, responsibility, and mutual esteem. At the same time, a sensitivity to the emotional experience of love developed in literature. Novels and poems of the Enlightenment, such as works by Gotthold Ephraim Lessing or Jean-Jacques Rousseau, focused on individual feeling and personal experience. Love was portrayed as a source of happiness, suffering, growth, and self-development. Rousseau in particular emphasized the natural sensitivity of humans and the importance of authentic feelings in relationships. The tension between social order and personal passion became the central theme of literary reflection. The Enlightenment also influenced the institution of marriage. While marriages were often still concluded for social or economic reasons, the ideal of marriage grew out of love. Individual affection, emotional happiness, and personal freedom of choice were increasingly seen as desirable aspects of a union. Love was no longer just a moral duty or social end, but increasingly a means of personal development and self-realization. The art and music of the Enlightenment reflected this new balance between emotion and reason. Painters such as Jean-Baptiste Greuze or artists of the Rococo period depicted emotional closeness, affection, and intimate relationships in their paintings. In music, especially operas and songs, the emotional intensity of love was combined with clear formal structure, symbolizing the harmony of heart and mind. To sum up, the Enlightenment put love in a new light. It was both reason and feeling, both moral choice and personal experience. The epoch laid the foundation for modern ideas of partnership, emotional attachment, and individual self-realization. Love was recognized as a force that shapes, inspires, and morally binds people. It was no longer just a social duty or artistic ideal, but a fundamental part of human existence that touches both the mind and the heart. Chapter 10. Love in Romance. Feeling over Reason. Romanticism, which began at the end of the 18th century and reached its peak in the 19th century, placed feeling above reason and made love the central expression of human existence. While the Enlightenment emphasized the rational dimension, Romanticism celebrated intuition, passion, longing, and individuality. Love was now seen not only as a social bond or moral obligation, but as a deep, often uncontrollable feeling that shapes the soul and inspires human creativity. In the literature of the Romantic period, the inner emotional world is in the foreground. Poets such as Novalis, Joseph von Eichendorff, or Heinrich Heine described love as a spiritual and emotional experience that lifts people above everyday reality. Love becomes a symbol of longing, infinity, and the search for ideal harmony. The Romantics idealized the relationship between lovers and portrayed it as a deep, almost mystical connection that fills the heart and mind at the same time. Nature played a special role in the Romantic depiction of love. Landscapes, seasons, and weather were used to reflect inner feelings. A storm could symbolize passion and restlessness, a quiet forest, intimate connection, and the sunset, the fleeting, ephemeral beauty of love. Romantic love was intense, often accompanied by melancholy, and focused on the pursuit of ideal, fully fulfilled affection. Music, painting, and the visual arts also took up the Romantic ideals. Composers such as Ludwig van Beethoven, Franz Schubert, and Frédéric Chopin created works that conveyed a longing for love, passion, and emotional depth. Painters such as Caspar David Friedrich depicted lovers in vast, dramatic landscapes, with external nature reflecting the inner world of emotions. The art of Romanticism turned love into an experience that touched the heart, soul, and senses in equal measure. In social terms, Romanticism brought with it a greater emphasis on individual freedom of choice in love relationships. The idea of marriage out of love became increasingly important, while arranged marriages or marriages befitting their status were viewed critically. Love was no longer just a means of fulfilling social or economic ends, but an expression of personal freedom, inner truth, and emotional depth. In summary, Romanticism celebrated love in all its intensity. It combined passion, longing, individuality, and spirituality, and put feeling above reason. Romantic love was deep, often idealized, and sometimes melancholic, but always an expression of the inner life and the human longing for perfection. She inspired literature, music, art, and philosophy, and shaped the understanding of love as a force that shapes life, uplifts the spirit, and touches the soul. Chapter 11. Love in the 19th Century, Social Norms and Emotional Freedom. The 19th century was an epoch of change, in which traditional social structures on the one hand and the pursuit of individual freedom on the other shaped the ideas of love. Industrialization, urbanization, and growing educational classes led to new social dynamics that also influenced love life. Love was increasingly seen as a balance between social responsibility and personal self-realization. This tension was clearly reflected in the literature of the 19th century. Writers such as Jane Austen, Gustave Flaubert, Lev Tolstoy, and the Brothers Grimm described love stories that both respected social norms and addressed the inner longing for emotional fulfillment. Love became a civilizational space in which feelings could be lived out, but at the same time, social duties could not be violated. Novels of this period showed that love relationships affected not only private feelings, but also moral, economic, and social responsibility. A central theme was marriage out of love. While in earlier centuries marriages were often arranged for political, dynastic, or economic reasons, emotional freedom of choice gained in importance. But even in the 19th century, marriage decisions were often tied to social position, dowry, or family honor. These conflicts provided material for numerous literary works. Love between socially unequal partners, secret feelings, forbidden passion, and personal sacrifice became recurring motifs. The art and music reflected the nuances of the time. Composers such as Frédéric Chopin, Richard Wagner, and Johannes Brahms expressed love, longing, and emotional tension in musical motifs. Painters such as John Everett Millais and William Turner depicted scenes of human intimacy, romantic encounters, and social conventions. The visual arts of the 19th century made it clear that love is not only an individual feeling, but also a socially shaped phenomenon in which personal wishes and norms are negotiated with each other. The Industrial Revolution also led to new forms of social encounter. Cities grew. Bourgeois salons, cafes, and dance halls became places where people met and communication between the sexes changed. This opened up new possibilities for romantic rapprochement, but it also brought challenges as social control and morality continued to have a strong impact. In these urban spaces, love had to move between closeness, freedom, and social observation. In summary, it can be said that the 19th century understood love as a complex interplay of emotion, reason, and social order. It was passion and duty at the same time, an expression of individual longing and a mirror of social norms. The literary, musical, and artistic processing of love showed that human feelings do not exist in isolation, but are related to moral, social, and cultural structures. In this epoch, love became a powerful expression of human individuality, which unfolds between freedom and responsibility, heart and society. Chapter 12. Love in the 20th Century: Emancipation, Psychology, and Modern Relationships. The 20th century brought profound social, cultural, and scientific changes that revolutionized the understanding of love and partnership. The two world wars, the emancipation of women, urbanization, new forms of communication, and the emergence of modern psychology led to love being increasingly perceived as a personal, emotional, and psychologically reflected experience. It was no longer just a social duty or romantic ideal, but an expression of individual identity and way of life. A decisive factor was the emancipation of women. Women gained education, economic independence, and political rights, which fundamentally changed their possibilities in love relationships. Love was now less shaped by economic constraints, and women were increasingly able to make their own decisions about choosing a partner and shaping relationships. This led to a greater emphasis on emotional closeness, mutual respect, and partnership equality in love. Psychology also had a great influence. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and other pioneers of modern psychology analyzed the inner drives, desires, and conflicts that determine human behavior in love and sexuality. Freud emphasized the subconscious, desire, and early childhood imprinting, while Jung emphasized the archetypal dimensions of love. Science opened up new perspectives on emotional bonding, sexual orientation, and the psychological dynamics of relationships. Love was no longer understood only as a social or moral phenomenon, but also as a psychological experience that deeply shapes the individual. These developments were reflected in literature, art, and music. Novels, plays, films, and paintings of the 20th century addressed intimate relationships, sexual liberation, unconventional partnerships, and emotional conflicts. Writers such as Virginia Woolf, Marcel Proust, and Franz Kafka shed light on the complexity of human emotions, the tension between longing and reality, and the inner mechanisms of love and passion. Artists and musicians experimented with new forms of expression that made emotional intensity, individual freedom, and social fractures visible. Another central aspect was the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 1970s. Traditional norms about marriage, gender roles, and sexuality were questioned, leading to greater freedom in forms of love and relationships. Love could now be understood more as an emotional and sexual partnership, regardless of status, class, or social constraints. At the same time, new discussions about responsibility, attachment, and emotional authenticity emerged. In summary, it can be said that the 20th century portrayed love in a multi-layered, individual, and reflective way. It was an expression of personal identity, emotional depth, and psychological complexity. Emancipation, psychology, and societal change allowed for a broader understanding of love, encompassing romantic passion, emotional intimacy, and personal freedom. Love was no longer seen as just an ideal, duty, or cultural construct, but as a living, dynamic experience that shapes and inspires the modern individual. Chapter 13. Love in the Digital Era. Virtual relationships and new forms of intimacy. The 21st century has once again revolutionized the understanding of love. The digital era, shaped by the internet, smartphones, and social networks, has fundamentally changed the way people form, experience, and maintain relationships. Love is no longer exclusively tied to physical proximity. It can be virtual, global, and flexible, creating new opportunities but also new challenges. Online dating platforms, social media, and messaging apps have democratized partner choice. People can get to know potential partners worldwide, compare interests and values directly, and build initial emotional bonds through digital communication. This allows for greater diversity and freedom, but at the same time leads to new questions. How reliable are digital impressions? How authentic are identities shown online? Digital love requires new skills in dealing with trust, communication, and emotional intelligence. The virtualization of relationships has also given rise to new forms of intimacy. Lovers can express closeness through videos, emojis, memes, or digital gifts. Long-distance relationships, once seen as an obstacle, are increasingly accepted as a normal form of partnership. At the same time, expectations of closeness, time management, and emotional availability are changing. Love today often has to be navigated flexibly between the real and virtual worlds, which offers both opportunities for creative expression and challenges for emotional stability. The digital era has also expanded the discussion about sexual identity, forms of relationships, and romantic diversity. Polyamory, LGBTQ+ partnerships, open relationships, and other alternative forms of love are finding access to communities, sharing, and recognition through digital networks. People can live their desires, identities, and emotions more visibly and acceptably, which strengthens the freedom and individuality of love. Art, literature, and media reflect these changes. Films, series, social media campaigns, and online literature address digital romance, relationship dynamics, and emotional conflicts that arise from virtual communication. Authors and artists reflect on the opportunities, but also the risks of digital proximity. Uncertainty, misunderstandings, and the tension between illusion and reality become central themes. In summary, it can be said that the digital era is shaping love globally, flexibly, and medially. It opens up new forms of intimacy, expands the possibilities of partner choice, and reinforces the importance of individual freedom. At the same time, it places demands on trust, communication, and emotional authenticity. Love in the digital age is a dynamic, multi-layered experience that is constantly evolving, reinterpreting the human longing for closeness, connection, and emotional fulfillment in new ways. Chapter 14. Love and Pop Culture, Media, Music, and Modern Myths. The pop culture of the 20th and 21st centuries has strongly shaped and mediated the perception of love. Films, music, series, advertising, and social media bring romance, passion, and emotional ideals into the everyday experiences of millions of people. Love is presented both as a personal experience and as a cultural product that reflects longings, values, and social norms. Love plays a central role in music. From the classic ballads of the 20th century to rock and pop hits to modern charts, love is the dominant theme. Songs tell of passion, loss, longing, separation, and reunion. They form collective ideas of relationships and emotional expression and give listeners the opportunity to reflect, and process their own feelings. Music has the power to transport universal emotions and amplify individual experiences of love. Film and television have also had a strong influence on ideals of love. Hollywood romance films, Bollywood epics, and international series often portray love as a dramatic, emotional, and transformative force. Romantic plots follow certain patterns, meetings, obstacles, conflicts, union that have become modern myths. These stories influence how people experience, expect, and imitate love by providing emotional role models, narrative expectations, and symbolic images. Pop culture has also made alternative forms of love more visible. LGBTQ+ relationships, intercultural partnerships, unconventional partnerships, and non-monogamous models are gaining greater acceptance through media exposure. Series, films, and songs contribute to the social recognition of diverse love experiences and to the spread of the idea of love as a universal, inclusive experience. Advertising and social media have further modified the romantic notion. Platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, or Pinterest often stage love as an aesthetic experience that represents happiness, closeness, and perfection. This creates both inspiration and pressure. Lovers are confronted with ideals that are often far removed from everyday reality. At the same time, digital pop culture opens up space for self-expression, creative representation of relationships, and community identity formation. In summary, pop culture aestheticizes, mediates, and reflects love. It transports emotional ideals, shapes social expectations, and makes diverse forms of partnership visible. Love in pop culture is both a mirror of human longing and a catalyst for cultural debates about relationship, intimacy, and emotional authenticity. It combines art, media, and everyday life into a complex web of feelings, stories, and ideals that shapes and constantly redefines the modern understanding of love. Chapter 15: Love and Science, Neuroscience, Hormones, and Psychology. The science of the 20th and 21st centuries has begun to explore love not only in literary or cultural terms, but also biologically, neurologically, and psychologically. It provides explanations for feelings, attachment behavior, and relationship dynamics, and shows that love is both an emotional experience and a complex interplay of body, brain, and behavior. Neuroscientific studies have shown that love activates certain brain regions, including the reward center, the prefrontal cortex, and limbic structures responsible for emotions. This activation creates feelings of happiness, euphoria, motivation, and bonding, similar to other intense positive experiences. Oxytocin, the so-called cuddle hormone, plays a central role in the development of trust, closeness, and bonding between partners. Dopamine controls motivation and reward, while serotonin regulates mood. The chemical processes in the body show that love is not just an abstract feeling, but a physiological reality that affects the entire organism. Psychology complements these findings with analyses of attachment styles, relationship dynamics, and emotional intelligence. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth developed theories about secure, insecure, and avoidant attachments that explain how early experiences with caregivers shape later love relationships. Love is understood here as an interplay of behavioral patterns, expectations, emotional security, and intimacy that develops throughout life. In addition, modern research examines how social, cultural, and environmental factors influence love. Education, economic independence, societal norms, and cultural narratives all affect partnership decisions, emotional bonds, and relationship stability. Digital media and online communication are also increasingly being considered in scientific studies as they create new forms of closeness, intimacy, and bonding. Recent studies have also shown that love encompasses several dimensions: infatuation, romantic love, sexual attraction, friendship, and long-term partnership. These dimensions are often intertwined but can activate different biological and psychological mechanisms. Science shows that love is a dynamic, adaptable phenomenon that is shaped evolutionarily, socially, and individually. In summary, science considers love to be a multi-layered, measurable, and explainable phenomenon. It combines biology, chemistry, neurology, psychology, and sociology, and provides insights into why people fall in love, how bonds are formed, and which factors promote stable, fulfilling relationships. Love, then, is not just a romantic ideal or cultural construct, but a universal, deep-rooted human experience that shapes body, mind, and society alike. Love in times of crisis. Love in times of crisis, war, hardship, and social upheavals. Love is often particularly intense in times of crisis, when uncertainty, danger, and social upheavals shape people's lives. War, natural disasters, economic hardship, and political upheavals put relationships to the test, changing mate choice, attachment dynamics, and emotional expressions. At the same time, especially in extreme situations, intense, profound love experiences often arise that reflect the human need for closeness and security. Historically, wars have greatly influenced the love landscape. In the First and Second World Wars, long-distance relationships, secret love letters, and emotional longing developed, while men and women were often separated for years. Letters, diaries, and memoirs show that love became a vital resource in such times, a psychological anchor that strengthened hope, courage, and the will to live. Simultaneous social changes, such as the entry of women into the world of work, changed traditional role models and led to a new balance between autonomy and partnership. Economic crises such as the Great Depression or political upheavals such as the French Revolution have also influenced love and family structures. Forced marriages, migration, and social insecurity forced people to strategically shape their emotional ties or to cultivate them under difficult conditions. In such times, love became a means of stabilization that could provide both emotional support and material security. Crises have also brought about new forms of solidarity in love relationships. Friendship, family ties, and romantic partnerships had to react flexibly to changes. Love manifested itself not only in romantic forms, but also through shared survival, mutual support, and shared responsibility. People developed creative ways to maintain closeness despite distance, separation, or social restrictions. The literature and art of these times reflect the intensity of the experiences of love. Novels, poems, plays, and pictures deal with love under pressure, loss, longing, and sacrifice. Artists such as Pablo Picasso or Eric Maria Remarque, writers such as Virginia Woolf and Ernest Hemingway portrayed the emotional power of love as an anchor essential for survival, providing support in the midst of chaos and destruction. In summary, love seems more intense, adaptive, and resilient in times of crisis. It responds to external threats with flexibility, creativity, and emotional strength. In such situations, love is not only a romantic ideal, but a vital force that strengthens psychological stability, hope, and social coherence. It shows that human relationships can exist, grow, and survive even under extreme conditions, making them a central part of human survival and social structure. Love has always fascinated and challenged philosophy because it is both intensely emotional and deeply moral. Philosophers of all eras have sought to define the nature of love, shed light on its ethical dimensions, and analyze its role in human life. Love is not just a feeling, but a complex phenomenon that raises questions of duty, virtue, freedom, and happiness. In antiquity, thinkers such as Plato and Aristotle reflected on love as the pursuit of beauty, truth, and perfection. Plato distinguished between physical love, which is limited to physical attraction, and a higher form of love, which he called eros, and which is directed towards spiritual and moral perfection. Aristotle saw friendship and love as central to a good life. Love is a virtue that allows for both joy and moral growth. The ethical dimension of love consists in the fact that it seeks not only one's own happiness, but also the well-being of others. In the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, philosophy combined love with religious and spiritual ideas. Christian thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas regarded love as a divine virtue that connects man and God. The love of God, but also the love of one's neighbor, was ethically imperative and led to moral action. At the same time, the idea of romantic love developed, combining personal passion and spiritual fulfillment, which was reflected in literature, art, and philosophy. In modern times, love has become more of a focus of individual freedom and self-realization. Philosophers such as Rousseau or Schopenhauer regarded love as an expression of inner longing, as an opportunity for self-knowledge and for connection with the other person. Rousseau emphasized the authenticity and genuineness of feelings, while Schopenhauer pointed out the connection between love, sex drive, and existential experience. Love became a central means of understanding one's own subjectivity and human existence. Modern philosophy, especially existentialism and postmodernism, examines love from the perspective of freedom, responsibility, and identity. Jean-Paul Sartre analyzed the tensions between individual autonomy and attachment to the other. Simone de Beauvoir researched equality and mutual recognition in love relationships. Love is understood here as an ethical and existential project that encompasses joy as well as conflict, closeness, and distance. In summary, philosophy considers love to be ethical, moral, and existential. It examines how love enriches one's own life and the lives of others, the responsibility it generates, and how it influences the pursuit of happiness, truth, and human perfection. In this context, love is not just a feeling, but a reflective action, a moral dilemma, and a central component of human thought, which has inspired and accompanied philosophy for thousands of years. Chapter 18: Love and Art: Expression, Inspiration, and Cultural Diversity. Love has inspired art since the dawn of human culture and remains one of the most universal themes in all forms of artistic expression. Painting, literature, music, theater, film, and modern media use love as a central motif to convey emotions, conflicts, and longings. She makes the invisible visible and the inexpressible tangible by translating personal experience into aesthetic form. In the painting of antiquity and the Middle Ages, love often symbolized divine virtue or romantic ideals. Images of couples, mythological figures, or saints reflected the understanding of closeness, passion, and moral order. The Renaissance saw the emergence of the ideal of romantic and passionate love, with artists such as Botticelli and Leonardo da Vinci capturing the aesthetic beauty of human emotions with pictorial perfection. In literature, love is an inexhaustible source of inspiration. From ancient epics such as Homer's Odyssey to modern novels by Jane Austen, Tolstoy, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, love permeates the stories of human experience. It is a motor for conflicts, a driving force for action, and a medium for reflection on humanity, morality, and social norms. Poets and writers use love to explore universal questions. What does proximity mean? How is fidelity defined? How do passion and pain arise? Music and theater enhance the emotional dimension of love. Operas, ballads, pop, and rock music take up themes such as passion, loss, longing, and reunion and create communal emotional experiences. Plays and modern film productions allow us to experience love as a dramatic force that escalates conflicts, shapes characters, and reflects on social issues. Modern art expands the representation of love through cross-cultural perspectives and alternative forms of love. Artists shed light on LGBTQ+ relationships, polyamory, long-distance relationships, or digital love worlds, and thus contribute to a diverse, inclusive, and realistic representation of human intimacy. Art thus becomes a mirror of social developments, but also a medium that promotes emotional education, empathy, and reflection. In conclusion, love in art is universal, changeable, and inspiring. It offers opportunities to express emotions, reflect social norms, and show cultural diversity. In art, love becomes a medium that connects people, creates identity, and makes the deep, universal longing for closeness, understanding, and emotional resonance tangible. Art and love are inextricably linked because both make the invisible visible and the feeling tangible. Chapter 19. Love and Politics: Power, Influence, and Social Norms. Love is not only a private feeling, but also a political phenomenon that influences power structures, social norms, and state institutions. Since ancient times, rulers, governments, and social systems have shaped the rules of love, marriage, and sexual relations in order to ensure social stability, loyalty, and power. Love is thus both a personal experience and a social and political instrument. In many cultures, marriage has historically been understood less as an expression of affection and more as a political and economic alliance. Dynastic marriages, alliances between noble families, or arranged partnerships were intended to secure power, land, and influence. The feelings of those involved were often secondary, but even in these politically motivated bonds, love could arise and influence private happiness. Politics and love were thus closely intertwined from the beginning, often in the field of tension between the individual and society, passion and duty. The development of modern states changed the relationship between love and politics. Bourgeois societies began to protect the right to free choice of partner, romantic love, and equality. Love relationships were increasingly recognized as a private matter, but they continue to be influenced by legal regulations, social norms, and economic conditions. Laws on marriage, divorce, adoption, and partnership reflect how politics shapes and regulates intimate relationships. At the same time, love becomes political when it is used as a symbol of freedom, rebellion, or social change. Movements for women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, or sexual self-determination made love and partnerships central political issues. The pursuit of recognition, respect, and equality in love relationships is inextricably linked to social power, social justice, and political activism. Love becomes a means of questioning social norms and legitimizing new forms of living together. The political dimension of love is also evident in cultural debates. Who is allowed to love whom? Which relationships are considered legitimate? How are emotional attachments recognized or discriminated against? Answers to these questions shape laws, education, the media, and public opinion. Politics thus influences how love is expressed, and socially accepted. In summary, love and politics are closely intertwined. Love is both instrument and resistance, private and public, feeling and social practice. It influences power structures, is regulated by laws, and at the same time serves as a catalyst for social change. The interplay of love and politics shows that human relationships never exist in isolation, but are always in the context of society, power, and cultural norms. Chapter 20. The Future of Love: Technology, Globalization, and New Forms of Intimacy. Love is on the threshold of a new age in which technology, globalization, and social change are profoundly changing its forms and ways of expression. Digital communication, social networks, dating apps, and virtual realities open up new ways of meeting, getting to know each other, and emotional bonding. While global mobility, migration, and cultural diversity shape love internationally and interculturally. Digitization has not only accelerated love relationships, but also made them more complex. People often meet partners through algorithms, filters, and profiles that take into account preferences, interests, and personality traits. Online communication creates closeness despite physical distance, enables long-term long-distance relationships, and opens up platforms for people whose forms of love are less accepted in traditional contexts. At the same time, new challenges arise: uncertainty about authenticity, loss of intimacy, and emotional overload due to constant availability. Love must learn to assert itself between real-time interaction and digital simulation. Globalization and migration expand the possibilities for love relationships and cultural encounters. People from different countries, cultures, and social contexts come together and form relationships that are diverse, hybrid, and often innovative. These encounters promote mutual understanding, adaptability, and cultural creativity, but also put societal norms and traditions to the test. Love is becoming increasingly transnational, intercultural, and flexible, giving rise to new forms of identity, attachment, and intimacy. Technological innovations such as virtual reality, AI-supported matchmaking, or robot relationships raise the question of how far love can go in the future. Can artificial intelligences create emotional bonds or simulate human closeness? How do we define intimacy when physical presence is no longer mandatory? These developments question traditional notions of love, sexuality, and partnership, and at the same time open up new possibilities for self-awareness, exploration, and emotional communication. The future of love, therefore, will be one of flexibility, inclusiveness, and experimental thinking, and requires questioning old norms, respecting individual needs, and promoting emotional creativity. Love remains a fundamental human experience, but it adapts to new conditions, integrates digital and global dynamics, and creates new forms of expression that are both individually fulfilling and socially relevant. In conclusion, love remains resilient, changeable, and universal in the 21st century and beyond. It outlasts crises, social upheavals, and technological transformations. Love is not just a feeling, but a dynamic force that connects individuals, communities, and cultures, inspires them, and reflects the human experience in all its complexity. The future of love promises to become even more diverse, creative, and inclusive without losing its core: the need for closeness, understanding, and emotional resonance.